StarVR. It's 5K, 210 degree view and angle. This is total immersion. And you know what? Complete overkill.
Hello and welcome to Virtually Odd, the series where we take a look at the weird past, odd present, and unknown future of reality-bending technology. From smell-o-vision to immersion rigs, there's always been a lot of crazy VR tech. But today, we're taking a look at this, the elusive StarVR 1. Packed with all the features that people have been asking for years, it's kind of the VR enthusiast's dream. And even though I've tried dozens of VR headsets from cheap to ridiculous $11,000 beasts, this has been the one headset that I've always wanted to try. The problem is that it's nearly impossible to get one. The StarVR website is up and running, but there's no way to actually order one. And buying one secondhand is also impossible because, well, nobody's selling them. And even if you have the money, it's almost like this thing just ceased to exist one day, which is really weird because there was a massive hype train for years. Reviewers have praised it endlessly, it was at trade shows, it's pretty well documented. And we'll get to the story of what happened, but first, let's just talk about why this thing was so hyped and sought after. The StarVR 1's big feature that sets it apart from almost every other VR headset is its massive field of view. Advertised at 210 degrees, it nearly completely fills the human eye vision range. And when you put on this headset, almost every corner of your eyes are filled with the virtual, something I've never really felt before. And the different experience in headset while using this FOV is pretty insane. It feels like a different era of technology. But the field of view itself isn't even necessarily why people praise the StarVR. Other companies like Pimax also make wide field of view VR headsets. The difference is that the StarVR 1 does it with almost zero distortion from edge to edge. VR just wraps around you without any fisheye or warping effect, something that has never really been done before for less than $10,000. But there's one other big difference between this and every other wide FOV headset out there: the weight and size. The StarVR 1 without the cable weighs just 450 grams, and it's almost the same size as a Valve Index, which is pretty darn small and light at less than half the weight of a Pimax Crystal and Index. Plus, it's got built-in Tobii eye tracking that's used for all sorts of things, automatically adjusting IPD, Steam VR tracking, and it's rocking a set of custom AMOLED displays. So the contrast ratios are just significantly better than any LCD panel out there. Black is black and bright scenes are, well, bright. Everything pops. And I'm sure you can see exactly why I've been wanting to get my hands on one of these for so long. That list of features sounds amazing, and the experience of using it is nothing short of ridiculous. It's the first time I've seen a distortionless massive field of view matched with a headset that's lightweight enough to actually use normally. And being able to see things in my peripheral vision just increases the immersion of everything in a very subliminal way. It's not so much the things you really notice, it's more so the overall experience of feeling like you're in the world, not so much looking into it. And it's maybe even a little overwhelming going from a 100-degree field of view headset to this. I'm just getting so much more visual information from everything around me. And I found myself jumping pretty often when I saw things in my peripheral because I'm just not used to anything being there. Like, the best way I could explain this is to have you try it for yourself. Just cup your hands around your eyes to cut off half of your real field of view, and you realize pretty quickly just how much of the world you're missing that way. VR is no different. But of course, that's not the whole story, and this is where things start taking a turn for the weird. As good as that all just sounded, it's certainly not perfect. A couple of things on this headset are definitely outdated by 2023. I mean, to even get it to work, I had to use a version of Steam VR that's meant to be compatible with Windows 7, and even then, not every game was working properly. But the really noticeable issue here is just the resolution of the headset. And I realize now just how spoiled I am by high-resolution devices like the Beyond, because with the StarVR 1, I feel like I'm taking a step back to 2016 and the original Rift clarity-wise. Its resolution of 1830 by 1464 per eye may sound good enough, but you have to remember that this resolution is being spread across 200+ degrees field of view. Most headsets have a much smaller FOV and have just a smaller area to spread their pixels across. Like the Valve Index, for example, has a lower resolution than this, but it still looks way sharper, which is a shame because the only thing that is stopping me from using this headset every day as my daily driver, besides the software deprecation of course, is the fact that it's just pretty blurry. Cable is also very chunky. I mean, it requires 2 DisplayPort cables to function, 1 for each eye. But yeah, the resolution really holds it back, unfortunately, which is kind of funny because this headset was supposed to ship 6 years ago. And at the time, these specs were absolutely groundbreaking for VR. People didn't even know how they were going to run it. You need a monstrous PC. But here's where everything about this headset completely shifts. Not only was this just supposed to be a version 1 with a successor coming very quickly to address that resolution issue, but this ridiculous headset technically never really shipped at all. There was no chance for a V2. So what the hell happened? Well, now's the time where we finally fall into the rabbit hole. What if I were to tell you that the StarVR 1 didn't start development in 2016, not in 2015, not even 2013, but its roots are actually fixed all the way back in 2011, in a time where VR was nothing. In fact, you could pretty much say that the entire world's VR enthusiasts were in one single place on the internet, a forum called MTBS 3D, the place where Oculus actually started. It's kind of the primordial soup of modern virtual reality. And on this forum, people from around the world shared their own DIY VR projects, traded hardware, and tested things together. Because at the time, there was no VR industry. It didn't exist. That is, until August 1st, 2012. The Oculus Kickstarter had just launched, and this single event would take virtual reality as a whole from a group of hobbyists on a forum to a worldwide interest. VR was back. And the story of Oculus tells itself after that. That's a video for another time. But from that same exact forum where Oculus got its start, there was another, a VR headset with a totally different goal and mindset, the Infiniti. This is Lionel Anton. He's a tinkerer. As he told me, he is fascinated with big screens. And that fascination in 2011 led him to build the biggest screen possible, a wide field of view VR headset. And after a few years of prototyping and trying things out, Lionel was ready to take his projects to the next level. And actually, exactly a year after the Oculus Kickstarter, Lionel goes public on the MTBS 3D forums with his open source 210-degree field of view VR headset. Sound familiar? The Infiniti. This is obviously pretty groundbreaking for the time, but I do want to bring up that Palmer Luckey, the Oculus founder, did actually make a 270-degree FOV VR prototype before this, but the conclusion of that test was that the rendering, cost, size, technology, everything about it was just prohibitively out of reach. It would be better to focus on smaller fields of view. Lionel and Infiniti, on the other hand, said that they can do it. They're up for the challenge. And the forums go pretty crazy. Obviously, everyone wonders if they're going to start a Kickstarter just as Oculus did. It worked for them. But Lionel has a very different plan. See, Kickstarter was actually unavailable in France at the time. So instead, he entered a technology competition held by Samsung, with a winning prize of 100,000 euros to continue development. And to put it simply, they did not win this competition, as it was Samsung's final decision, not the public vote. But none of that mattered because by the end of 2013, Infiniti just goes dark. Other high FOV projects do start popping up around this time, but every single one runs into the same problem that Infiniti and Palmer had. It's just really hard to get games to run correctly at this sort of field of view. Video cards, Windows, and game engines especially just weren't really built for it. So wouldn't it be just great if a giant game studio could come in and help? Every once in a while, a game releases and just blows up in popularity, propelling that studio and IP to incredible heights. And in 2013, Swedish studio Starbreeze had their own breakout success with Payday 2, bringing in significant funding. And of course, they went on a spending spree after that. In early 2015, acquiring the Valhalla game engine, with plans to turn it into the main proprietary engine used by the company, but more specifically, they wanted to turn Valhalla into the best VR game engine out there, which would be very useful because later that year, Starbreeze makes another big purchase, a company you might recognize, Infiniti. And in one swift move, Infiniti dies and is reborn.
StarVR. It's a VR helmet for overkill gamers. Total immersion. Holy fuck bananas! Complete fucking overkill. Let's roll.
In new hands, the StarVR prototype with better funding and a game studio behind it to help with the biggest problems this sort of headset would face, E3 2015 absolutely blew people's minds with quad displays, 5K total resolution. They even had a Walking Dead VR demo. And yeah, The Walking Dead. For some reason, that franchise and VR are tied even deeper than you can possibly imagine. But most importantly, this is where the StarVR hype starts. A partnership is formed between Starbreeze, Acer, and StarVR, with Starbreeze and Acer going 50-50 on StarVR's ventures. And here's where things start moving fast. IMAX hops on board with a massive fund to bring StarVR to theaters worldwide. VR arcades start investing. There's tons of great press. 2016 was a good year, or at least it would appear that way. Because in late 2017, the first warning signs begin to appear. Acer makes a move to take majority control of StarVR with a $5 million injection. Now, instead of the 50-50 split with Starbreeze, they own 66%, which means they get to decide everything. And this wasn't necessarily because Acer really wanted to do something with StarVR. It was because Starbreeze was in the middle of collapsing. That Valhalla game engine they bought turned out to be a total dud. They spent 2 years trying to get it to work, and the result was that they had nothing to show for it, and they lost tens of thousands of hours of work, millions of dollars, and the only real choice they had was to frantically move to Unreal Engine, something they should have done 3 years ago. But it was kind of too late. By this time, a perfect storm was brewing, and in 2018, shit hit the fan. Almost exactly 5 years after Infinity made its first announcement on a forum, StarVR finally announces its headset. And this is the StarVR 1. Finally, the headset people have been waiting for, and it immediately gets critical acclaim from everyone that tries it. It seems it was worth the wait. And at the same time, Pimax, StarVR's only real FOV competitor, still hasn't shipped after their own Kickstarter. And given reviews at the time, StarVR was just a significantly more complete product at the time. It was the best VR headset you could buy. And keep in mind, this is before Quest, before Index. It was just a different time. And people were really excited. This was going to be a product sold to everyone, enthusiasts, businesses, prosumers. There was even an XT version that had more capabilities. But just a couple months after its announcement, out of nowhere, StarVR is delisted from the Taipei Stock Exchange, following Acer stating it may disband or even sell the company, which may seem out of nowhere, but it turns out Starbreeze was in way worse trouble by late 2018 than anybody had thought. Their Walking Dead title they've been working on completely flopped. After delays, an engine swap, and after pushing the entire company to work 100-hour weeks for a year, the CEO was fired, Starbreeze stock plummeted, and the company filed for reconstruction. It was bad. And to show you how bad it was, the office was even raided by Swedish authorities for possible insider trading. Starbreeze was complete toast. So, StarVR, once again, goes completely dark. Just weeks after finally announcing their headset they've been working on for years is delisted from the stock exchange and in total limbo. And they made one final announcement around this time that they were halting all projects and were converting to a private company. It would be almost 2 years before anything came out of StarVR, and turns out those 2 years were some of the biggest VR ever had. The Quest, an Index, and Rift S launched, the Pimax 8K was delayed again, but noticeably, there's a missing slot of the StarVR for this whole time period. Most people thought it was just dead. But in 2020, the company breaks the silence out of nowhere and announces it has started shipping StarVR 1s. However, everything's twisted and distorted. The headset still costs $3,200 2 years later, and they will only sell directly to businesses. Like, you had to apply to get one. And this was not the policy before. It was supposed to be a high-end headset for everyone, but that changed. And now it was pretty much for no one. And the outdated specs, mainly resolution, were amazing in 2018, but below average 2 years later. It was honestly too late. It was too expensive, too niche, and even if you wanted one, they wouldn't sell it to you. And it was around this time that Lionel and his co-founder, the brains behind StarVR, left Acer. There was supposed to be a V2 and a V3, a much more ambitious refresh, but it never happened. And within a few months, Acer drops another bomb. They were done with the StarVR. The pandemic had put a damper on their plans for location-based VR experiences, arcades shut down, IMAX VR also shut down, and the business-oriented approach wasn't paying off either. It was just too expensive, too niche, and not targeted towards the right demographic. Since then, the StarVR website is still live, but it doesn't really do anything. It's just a husk. And today, the StarVR 1 remains as elusive as ever. A ghost of a dream that was once the pinnacle of VR technology. It's the headset that could have, should have been a game changer. But in the end, it was reduced to a mere collector's item, a rare relic of a time when VR was on the verge of exploding. And while I certainly didn't expect Payday 2, Acer, Palmer Luckey, and MTBS 3D to be part of this whole story, at the end of the day, this thing right here is still pretty amazing VR headset. And I gotta say, it did not disappoint me after all this time of wanting to try one. But I think what the StarVR 1 really is it's a tragic reminder of what could have been. It's a sad, twisted tale of vision and innovation being defeated by weird corporate politics, financial struggles, and bad timing. And in my opinion, a complete lack of trust in enthusiasts and the consumer side of VR. I mean, take it from experience. VR people are crazy. They will buy expensive headsets if they're the best, but Acer didn't believe that. But I also have to wonder, going all the way back to 2013 when Infinite Eye was often known as the best competitor to the original Oculus, what if they had done a Kickstarter just like Oculus? Everything just might have been different. We might all be walking around with 210-degree Infinite Eye 3s for all I know. But that's, of course, just a what if. We don't know any of that. The only thing I do know is that the StarVR 1 still deserves its legendary status as the holy grail of VR hardware. Not so much as a success or as a perfect piece of hardware, but as a symbol of what we want but can't have. And it's ingrained in the history of VR just as much as Palmer Luckey and Oculus is, and it should go down in VR history for that reason. We will never know what could have been, but we at least know what it is. And the StarVR 1 and its entire past, dating back more than a decade, is truly odd. Virtually odd, that is.
This is total immersion.
The virtual reality race has just begun.
We're going to see a lot more from this StarVR headset in the near future.